I left the hospital and began wandering. And I went down to the Bowery and hung out with the drunks. I went to Times Square and hung out with the prostitutes and just wandered and saw another part of reality. And I began to question everything. It was like overnight, my belief in the American system, the American dream, and my Catholic upbringing just came shattering down. I worked on Wall Street and I was living in an ashram and meditating every day. And after meditation, I would take a couple cups of coffee to get my mind really active. So yoga can be practiced in business. Business can become a complete path, a complete yoga in and of itself.
Yeah.
Whereas meditation can put an end to stress, give you mental clarity. And I find it's the most productive tool that executives can have.
And what exactly is the fruit of meditation?
Joy, peace, happiness, fulfillment. Ultimately, it's complete and full knowledge of the self. And the benefits along the way are you get the fruits of connecting with the self.
Welcome to Leaders Unscripted. I'm your host, Divya Madan. Today's episode is special and close to my heart because we have Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, a globally renowned spiritual leader, and I am his disciple. Swami Brahmananda was born as David Donald Now on March 2nd, 1950 in Pittsburgh, United States. He is a graduate of Columbia University in New York, studied at universities in France, Lebanon, and Japan. He has lived a corporate life as a young American and operated in the financial markets of Wall Street. He met Swami Muktananda, an Indian spiritual leader, and became his disciple in August 1975. He did sadhana with Muktananda in his ashrams for 8 years. He practiced Siddha Yoga, studied Kashmir Shaivism, Vedanta philosophies, received Sannyasa Diksha, and was given the name Brahmananda in the year 1980. He was appointed as National Coordinator of Siddha Centers and Ashrams in the US, including 35 ashrams and 350 meditation centers. In 1995, he founded the God Realization Ministry, which taught the principles of Siddha Yoga in more than 200 Christian churches in the US. He has been the spiritual director of Simple Peace Retreats in Assisi, Italy, where he taught silent meditation. And that retreat center was named as a top 10 retreat center in the world by numerous media channels, including the CNN, Newsweek, Travel and Leisure magazine, and many more. Brahmananda has been offering satsang and conducting meditation retreats in India for the past 4 years to further share the immense spiritual wisdom he has received from his guru. And today, I feel blessed to welcome him on the sets of Leaders Unscripted. Swamiji, welcome to Leaders Unscripted. I am honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm deeply honored.
Sure. You were born on March 2nd, 1950 in Pittsburgh, United States as David Donald Now. You were a 1970s American man with every door open, a Columbian University graduate. We want to know who was a 20-year-old David Now and what was he looking for from life?
Well, as you mentioned, I was born in Pittsburgh. I'm the oldest of 13 children. So I have 2 brothers and 10 sisters, raised very Catholic, and was an athlete growing up and a good student. Was accepted at Columbia University on a football scholarship. And when I arrived there, I came as a devout Catholic and as a fundamentally conservative American. I arrived in 1968 at Columbia, and this was a time of great revolution. There were protests against the war in Vietnam that were happening, and many of my values got questioned. And as we probed deeper with people who understood the situation in Vietnam and maybe had more of a spiritual rather than a religious background, began to question me, and I began to question my own values. And one of the turning points, one of the really important turning points was during a football game. We were playing against Penn University, and I got hit in the ribs by somebody's helmet and actually broke my ribs. And I had to go to the hospital at Columbia University. And while I was there, my eyes were opened. I'd seen another dimension of reality I'd never seen. I saw people dying. I saw one fellow came in and he had a knife in his back. Another woman was crying because her husband was having a heart attack and was dying. So much so that the broken ribs that I was experiencing seemed really minimal. And I left after about 12 hours of waiting in the hospital. I left the hospital and began wandering. And I went down to the Bowery and hung out with the drunks. I went to Times Square and hung out with the prostitutes and just wandered and saw another part of reality. And I began to question everything. It was like overnight, my belief in the American system, the American dream, and my Catholic upbringing just came shattering down. It was like the awakening of the Buddha. Buddha had never seen old age, suffering, and death, and I saw it in one complete moment. And it was really a radical shift where I began to question everything. Right around that time, my roommate took a course in transcendental meditation and invited me to his room to meditate. Now, he couldn't give me the mantra that they use there or anything. He said, just sit quietly and have no thoughts. And as I sat, I thought I was losing my mind. My mind was racing, filled with thoughts. I couldn't control it. And I realized that what I'd believed in for my whole life and what I thought to be true, the illusion was beginning to vanish. And that set me off on a quest to find out what's really true. And of course, being at Columbia University, we had to read the 100 great books, which questioned values and just opened up another dimension that I had never perceived before. Really started my spiritual quest, which took me to about 75 countries before the age of 25. I was at Columbia University. I put together a study program abroad so that I spent one semester in Paris, France studying, another semester in Beirut, Lebanon, where I met a Sufi master and began to have experiences in meditation. I spent part of my senior year in Tokyo, Japan, studying world religions and spent time living in a Zen Buddhist monastery there. So I was really looking for some truth, some reality that I could hang my hat on.
Sure, sir. We are very much interested in knowing what really happened with you in August 1975.
So after traveling the world, literally 75 countries before the age of 25, practicing, by now I had actually taken transcendental meditation and was meditating on a daily basis. I was doing yoga, studying with the Rosicrucians. In fact, I took a course with the Rosicrucians, a 2-year correspondence course. And the very last lesson at the end of 2 years appeared, and it said, when the student is ready,
The master appears.
the master appears. And I got the God chills. My hair stood on end when I read that line. And that week, my yoga teacher told me that there was a great Siddha master coming to the United States. Swami Muktananda would be coming. She was a disciple. And she had received a spiritual awakening in his presence, and she invited me to go meet him. He was coming to New York City. Now, unfortunately, at the time, I was too busy, believe it or not, even though I'd been seeking. I was producing a feature movie and directing an off-Broadway play at the same time. So when he was in town, I couldn't meet him. And I told my friend Rudrani, I can't, I'm just too busy. And I went to work the next day, And I was the producer on the movie. And I got the news that I was fired because we were over budget.
Oh,
So I was crestfallen, but I still had the play. The play was opening at the Provincetown Playhouse in New York that weekend. And it opened, and we got just terrible, terrible reviews. And the show closed that very weekend. It never even got a second weekend. So the following Monday, my friend Rudrani called. She said, I know you're too busy to come, to meet the guru in New York, but a group of us are going to California and we're going by car. Would you like to come? And I said, well, I have the time now. It was as if the path had been cleared for me to travel. And so we did. There was 9 cars, and we traveled all the way from New York City to California. And the day that we arrived, we got the news that Muktananda had suffered a heart attack. And he was in the San Francisco hospital. And I was so disappointed coming. I really felt something special with this guru. But the next day he sent a message. He said, there's a group of newcomers who've arrived. Come, I'll meet you in the hospital. And they set up a little darshan room in the waiting room at the hospital. So I was really excited. Wow, I'm going to finally get a chance to meet this great guru. And I heard he could read people's minds, and my mind wasn't completely pure in those days. So I remember meditating extra long that morning to purify my mind so I wouldn't have any nasty thoughts. And then, having lived in a Zen monastery, they often give you Zen koans to test the disciple. So I had a cup of coffee to make sure that my mind was really alert in case he asked me a test question. Then I put on my spiritual clothes. I had a denim jacket with the signs of the zodiac and a pair of jeans with an Om patch on the rear end. And I was really ready to make a good impression on Muktananda. So they brought me to the hospital, and there was a line. And when it came my turn to greet him, I sat before him, my mind pure, nice and quiet, ready for that test question. And he looked at me and he said, what's your name? And my mind was completely blank. I couldn't remember my own name. And he laughed and he said, well, where are you from? Again, no idea where I was from. It was like my mind was completely still, no thoughts. But I remembered my name. I said, I'm David now. And he said, very good. And he swatted me with his peacock feathers. And that made me kind of woozy. I began to feel something. But the first thing I noticed, my mind was completely still. And then he said, well, what kind of work do you do? He was giving me a chance to say something, right? What kind of work do you do? But I had no idea what really. But I remembered where I was from. I said, Baba, I'm from New York. And then it dawned on me, no, I'm not from New York. I'm from Pittsburgh. So in his presence, I made a complete fool of myself, And he looked at me and he said, go sit over here, sit in the corner. And while I was greeting other people. And as I sat there, I noticed that for the first time in my life, my mind was completely still. In his presence, my mind couldn't even begin to think. Perfectly still. And at that moment, as I was realizing that, he looked over at me and there was a bolt of light that came from his eyes, entered into my heart. And there was an explosion. Just the only way to describe it. This is really ineffable, impossible to describe it. I felt an explosion in my heart. My heart opened wide. And I was madly, madly in love with everyone and everything. The tears were streaming down, my cheeks. The room was filled with light. And I went into samadhi in that moment, which lasted for the better part of 3 hours. When I finally came out of meditation, there was no one there. I was all by myself. But I'd been changed. I'd received something that I had never heard of before called Shaktipat, which is the direct transmission of fully awakened conscious energy into the disciple, which awakens the Kundalini and facilitates meditation. Now, I knew nothing about this. I'd never heard any of it, but I had the actual experience of it before hearing of it. And I knew that I had found what I was looking for. So I never went back to New York City. I never cleaned out my apartment. I moved into the ashram that day and lived with my guru and living in his ashrams until he passed away.
okay. That's a wonderful story. So, for the audience who may not understand clearly, what does Shaktipat mean? Can you explain it in greater detail? What exactly does it mean?
So, Shakti is the divine power. In our tradition, which is the tradition of Kashmiri Shaivism, Shakti is the divine power that exists within all of us. It's the power that created the universe. So if Shiva is pure being, Shakti is becoming. So Shiva is the stillness, Shakti is the energy that becomes the universe. And so this Shakti is said to reside in a human being in a limited or contracted form, but it has the potential to awaken fully and completely. So Shaktipat is literally the descent of the divine Shakti from a lineage directly from Shiva or through a lineage that awakens that dormant power. You see, we all have this Kundalini within us already. It's what controls our breathing, our respiration, controls our digestion and our heartbeat. It controls all of the autonomic functions in human being. It's the life force itself. And at the same time, it's said to be functioning at just a tiny fraction of its true potential. Because Shiva, Shakti, and willing to become the universe, had to contract themselves to become individual human beings. So Shaktipat awakens that dormant Kundalini so that she can unfold back to her universal consciousness with all of the extraordinary powers of Shakti. These all exist within us. We all have the potential to open and to expand these energies back to their natural prowess.
Right, right. So, when you received Shaktipat, that transmission of energy from your guru, Swami Muktananda, and you just told me that for 3 hours you were in a different world, what exactly did you feel in those 3 hours? And what did life look to you after those 3 hours?
The best word to describe the experience is ineffable. The yogis talk about it's really, there's no words to describe it. I was in a state of ecstasy, a state of transcendent peace, the peace that transcends words, deep sense of peace, wholeness, love, all of those together. The word in Sanskrit that probably best described it is ananda. All this would be paramananda because it's the supreme bliss. And having tasted that experience, everything else in life paled in comparison. So this was an immediate transformation for me that all I wanted was more of that. And the promise in our tradition is that that's our essential nature. That's the nature of the Atman, the nature of the inner self, and that by knowing the self, we can live in this state of transcendent bliss while simultaneously living in the world. This is what I love about the tradition of Kashmiri Shaivism. We're not asked to leave the world, but we're asked to realize the self and bring the consciousness of the divinity of our own being and the divinity of others, bring that into the world, bring it into our work, bring it into our family life, and to really live as an embodiment of consciousness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Swamiji. Okay, so Swami Muktananda had instructed you to establish an ashram in Los Angeles, United States. But you went on to coordinate 35 ashrams and 350 meditation centers across US. This, in my opinion, looks like an extraordinary journey of organizational expansion at a large scale. What did this journey teach you about leadership?
Well, it was in 1980 that Baba gave me sannyas and gave me the name Swami Brahmananda. And I lived with him in the ashram and sat next to him as he gave the intensives and was his master of ceremonies for the program. So I got to see firsthand what it's like to live with a fully realized being who functions so effectively in the world. The expansion from just a few ashrams to 350 meditations really was not any of my doing. It was the great Siddha, Swami Muktananda, who really enabled this enormous growth. He just asked me to administer it. So living with Muktananda, it's hard to put into words how he functioned. The best way I could describe it is that he was always in touch with his own divinity, always in touch with the inner guru. His guru was Bhagavan Nityananda. Bhagavan Nityananda awakened him. And Muktananda lived from this place of spontaneous, natural flow. He lived in the flow. He empowered others. I guess that was the one thing that I found most powerful about him, was that he empowered everyone who came into his presence. Can you imagine sitting with someone who looks at you as if you're divine, as if you're God himself, herself? And when you would look into his eyes, some would say there was no one there. There was no individual person there. There was universal consciousness. And to sit in the presence of one who sees you as divine, honors you as divine, worships you as divine, is the most empowering thing in the universe. And this is how he manifested his meditation centers and ashrams, is that he empowered people. He empowered me. When he said stay and start an ashram, I felt overwhelmed by it. There was no ashram, no physical ashram there. He was doing programs in Los Angeles every night for 1,500, 2,000 people, and there was no place for them to go when he left. So he said, start an ashram. And I remember the first intensive that we did, because he said, start an ashram. And even though we didn't have an ashram yet, we did a Shaktipat intensive in the same facility that we were at before. And I remember the night before the ashram just feeling totally overwhelmed. How could I, after Baba was here, facilitate this Shaktipat? And so something inside of me said, go put your head on Baba's sandals. Before he left, he gave me his clothing, his sandals, his peacock feathers, and said, do this, as I did it. So I put my head on his sandals, and just felt such a deep love and such a deep connection. And again, that same voice spoke to me and said, look up, look up. So I looked up and I could see above me hovering Baba's face. And his face was on the sandals of his guru, Bhagavan Nityananda. And as I leaned back, I could see Bhagavan's face was on the sandals of his guru, Ishwara Iyer. And I leaned back as far as I could see, and there was no end to this lineage. And so the message for me was surrender to the guru, allow the energy to flow through you, become a pure vehicle, a pure vessel. Don't get in the way. Don't let ego or pride or doership interfere with the natural flow of this divine power of the lineage. And so that's the way
So from leadership perspective, it's more about empowering others, finding the right mentor who walks the talk, talks the walk, and who is as pure as, divine peace. And then you'll be able to effectively lead others.
Beautiful. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How wonderful.
To see the highest in others.
And see the highest.
To see their capacity. Baba saw something in me that I didn't see. He was always pushing me to be more, to be greater, to expand my capacities, and put me in situations that I thought were impossible for me as a human being to do. And yet through the power of grace, by allowing the grace of the Guru to flow through me, magic happened.
How wonderful. I'm feeling spellbound right now, by the way, but I have to move on with this podcast. Okay, so Swamiji, you have traveled across 75 countries. You've taught in Christian churches, Sufi centers, Buddhist monasteries, Hindu ashrams. What, in your opinion, is one thing that every human being, irrespective of their religion, is searching for in life?
I would say that's happiness. I think everyone wants to be happy. No one wants to suffer. There's an ancient dictum that says, Sarva dukkha nivritti paramananda prapti, which is the purpose of a human life, is to put a permanent end to all forms of suffering and to attain the full measure of bliss. Now, being in the human body, we have pain, but we don't have to add suffering to it. So by knowing the self, we can transcend suffering and live in a state of eternal bliss. And that's universal. That's why the teachings of my beloved Guru are so universal. He said, meditate on your own self, honor yourself, love yourself. God dwells within you as you. What you're looking for is already inside of you. I think what's common to most traditions that people are looking outside of themselves for satisfaction, for joy. And my Baba taught me it's within. It's already within you. Just bring your awareness within and you can transcend suffering and attain the full measure of bliss in this body. You don't have to die to go to heaven. The kingdom of heaven, as Christ said, the kingdom of heaven is within you.
So look for happiness within you instead of the material world outside.
Yes. It doesn't exclude the external world, but it realizes that the happiness that we experience comes from within. We can be a billionaire and be absolutely miserable because we're disconnected to the divinity as consciousness within us. And the poorest of people, can experience great joy by knowing that God is within them. What they're looking for is in here, not out there. So if there's one core message in our tradition is that I would say is end looking for happiness outside of yourself. It's within. Learn how to meditate, learn how to connect to that, and then you can live in the world joyfully. There's no need to renounce anything, nothing that needs to be given up, except for the concept that you can find it outside yourself. Look within, everything's there already.
We are full divine whole beings in ourselves.
Already. As we are. See, one of the misconceptions that I had growing up was that I needed to become perfect before I could realize God. I needed to get rid of all my faults and my foibles and my ego and all my shortcomings, and then I would be ready to know God. Shaivism says you can recognize God, then those unnecessary parts fall away naturally. So we don't have to wait. I think that's one of the things we find in religion is that we think that we're a sinner, and that we have to become fully perfect and then we become a saint or something, right? Shaivism says, recognize your own self. We're not sinners. I was raised Catholic, and we had to go to confession every week when I went to Catholic school and confess our sins. So I was a little shocked when my Baba told me that I wasn't a sinner. In fact, he tells a wonderful story that he was walking along the Ganges one day, and one of the priests came up, and Baba said he knew that he just wanted to get money, but he would go along with him. So Baba said, okay. The priest said, pray with me. Baba said, okay. And the priest said, repeat after me, I am a sinner. I am a sinner. And Baba looked at him and said, you are a sinner. You are a sinner. And the priest said, no, say, I am a sinner. And Baba said, but I'm not a sinner. I'm the self. I'm pure and perfect as I am already. You see, the human part of us can make mistakes. We're fallible. We have our faults and foibles, right? But that doesn't preclude the fact that we're also divine. So we begin to shift our identity from this human mortal body that's going to die and rot to the spirit that's already within us. So it's just a simple shift in who do I identify with? Do I identify with the body and its actions and the world and what I create? Or do I identify with pure consciousness, pure being, which is eternal and unchanging and full of joy and full of love? So this can happen while we still have human shortcomings.
Absolutely. This mindset shift is everything. I think since the time I have started, attending your Shaktipaths, this is the mindset shift I have been experiencing, and I feel a full human being, a full divine God in myself, and my all of my flaws have started going away automatically since the time I have started believing in my own divinity. So I've experienced this myself firsthand. So thank you so much for sharing that.
It happens spontaneously and naturally. What no longer serves us just falls away. Just like when we were kids, we liked penny candies and our tastes evolved and grew into higher pleasures. It's the same thing on the spiritual path. As we meditate, we're able to see the effect of our actions. We understand why this one's helpful and this is not. So those ideas or actions that no longer serve us, it's easy to just let them go. We don't have to renounce anything. They fall away
Fall away
unnaturally
automatically, naturally.
because they're too painful. Getting angry and yelling at somebody, we realize, oh, this doesn't feel so good. This feels pretty bad. Why do I do that? So you let it go.
Yeah, ego goes away, anger goes away. All of the flaws actually start going away. Yeah.
They do.
Okay, so moving on, you founded God Realization Ministry and taught Siddha Yoga principles. So, technically, both of these two are very different spiritual traditions. So, how did that happen in your life?
Well, I was 19, what was it, 1995. And I was married at the time. I had 2 children and was married and was looking for a tradition that I could raise the children and that would be compatible with my wife's belief system. She was Jewish, right? So we were looking, and she didn't want to do yoga, and I didn't want to do the Torah, and we tried lots and lots of different things. And so this particular Sunday, I remember it was Father's Day, 1995, we went into a Unity church, and I listened to the pastor, Marge Britt, giving this wonderful talk in Christian terms, but that completely resonated with the truth. She was saying, the kingdom of heaven is within. God dwells within you. And I was like really, really excited that this was going to work. But I was concerned that my wife wouldn't resonate with this. But I looked over at her and she was weeping. Something had touched her heart. So we found a tradition that blended the two. The Unity teachings blend Eastern scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita and the teachings of Vivekananda, with the Christian teachings of Jesus. Charles Fillmore wrote a lot about that, particularly a book called the 12 Powers of Man. So he had done a lot of the work. He met actually Vivekananda at the World Parliament of Religions, heard him speak, and was inspired by that to form the Unity Church, right? So the commonality was there. After the church service, I was just having a cup of tea after the program, and the minister came up to me, and the way she described it, she said, there was a man standing in the corner, and there was a ball of light surrounding him, and I had to go and introduce myself. So she did. She came up, she introduced herself, and she said, you're here to teach, aren't you? I said, no. She said, come see me tomorrow. So I went and saw her, and we had this really a mystical marriage where we had this deep connection. We started a program on Wednesday nights teaching the commonalities of the Eastern teachings with the Christian teachings. And we were studying a particular book called The 12 Powers of Man by Charles Fillmore. And we began to see that there were so many quotes from the Eastern scriptures in the book that hadn't been attributed. So we saw the commonalities. And Marge invited me to do a Shaktipat intensive at the church. So we did a weekend intensive. People got Shaktipat. And we continued to have this ministry every night. It's still going on. It's been over 30 years now where people meet and meditate. And that fall, Marge invited me to the Unity Ministers Cruise. Now, each year they would get together and all the ministers would come and they would share their experiences and that. And word got out that Unity of Tustin, where I'd been teaching, something was happening called Shaktipat. And the ministers asked me if I would do it on board. So I did. We had a Shaktipat intensive during the cruise. It was a week-long cruise. And I gave Shaktipat, the lineage gave Shaktipat to the ministers. And out of that one cruise, I got invitations to teach in 200 churches across the United States. So I kind of gave up the work that I was doing and got myself a camper and went and traveled for the next 5 years, traveling, giving Shaktipat in Christian churches. Now, interestingly enough, Christianity does have a tradition of Shaktipat. Jesus, in my opinion, was a Shaktipat guru. Pentecost Sunday, when the apostles were all gathered, they were huddled in the upper room, fearing for their life because Jesus had been crucified, and they didn't want to be crucified, so they were in hiding. When the tongues of fire came down, literally, the scriptures say that there were tongues of fire, and that there was a spiritual awakening, and the apostles began to speak fearlessly, and they could even speak in tongues, and they began to try, and they started the Christian church. They received Shaktipat from Jesus. And there are many, many in India who believe that Jesus spent time
In India.
here in India.
Yes,
And I happen to,
I am one of those believers.
I am too. I am too, yes.
Wonderful. How wonderful. Okay, since we are talking about different religions across the world, you've seen different religions up close and personal. You are practicing spirituality for a long time. For our audience, in simple layman language, what is the difference between being religious and being spiritual?
Let me start with what's spiritual. Spirit means one who's doing practices to recognize the spirit within. That becomes the focus. The challenge with churches is that they have structure, they have dogmas, and they have belief systems, and many of them require an intermediary. You have to come to a church and believe in all the doctrines and give money to the church and support in order to one day receive the gift of grace and enter into the kingdom of heaven. Spirituality says the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says it, the kingdom of heaven is already within you. It doesn't require an intermediary. It doesn't require belief systems. It doesn't really even require a belief in God, believe it or not. That you can be an atheist and still believe in your own self, believe in the power that exists within you, and realize the self without having any intermediaries in between. So I would say spirituality is the direct path, and church is an indirect way.
How beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. Okay, so moving on, from 2015 to 2019, you were a spiritual director at Simple Peace Retreats, Assisi, Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And you've spent 5 years there teaching silent meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does sustained silence do to a person?
It's a complete spiritual path in and of itself. And I can compare it to the yoga tradition of Patanjali. Patanjali, in one of the sutras, says, Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. That yoga is the stilling of the vrittis of the mind. And when we do silent meditation or we practice a silent lifestyle, you find that the vrittis means the movements of the mind, whether it's perception or thinking, those vrittis begin to slow down. And as we eliminate them, Patanjali says, tada drishtaha. When the vrittis are still, then the self can reveal itself. And so when we would do these silent retreats in Assisi, people would come for a week, and we would quiet the mind in meditation and then maintain a silent lifestyle for the week, so the mind wouldn't be reactive. Give them a chance to go deep, deep inside into the stillness, into the self.
So, a lot of corporate professionals think and feel that relentless passion, restless, and racing mind is the secret of their corporate success. And they are afraid of a calmer mind because they think that it will make them less competitive and less sharp. So, what would you like to say to them about the power of a calm mind?
Well, I can relate to that idea, because I worked on Wall Street.
Exactly.
And I was living in an ashram and meditating every day. And after meditation, I would take a couple cups of coffee to get my mind really active again. So I had that belief. And what happened for me was that I got in touch with my inner intuition through meditation. There's a word in Sanskrit called pratibha, which is the divine inspiration, where the highest consciousness within us speaks to us, not necessarily in words, but in inspiration. And there's great power in that because it sees it from a global perspective. I'll tell a couple stories of how I began to experience this. So I was living in the ashram. This is 1976, I think it was. And living in the ashram, working on Wall Street, raising money to drill oil wells in Ohio. I had no experience. I was a filmmaker. I had no technical knowledge of how limited partnerships or public offering. I had no idea of how any of that worked. And my job was to go to Wall Street and to raise money to drill these wells. And I happened to be living in the ashram at the same time. So it was really the best of both worlds. I remember this one particular day where I was in deep meditation, and a little voice inside said, after meditation, go to the National Securities Dealers Book, which is about this thick with thousands and thousands of investment banking firms in it, and open to page 569. I didn't think much of it, but at the end of meditation, I opened the book up, page 569, and it was almost as if there was a tiny little firm. It kind of like zoomed out to me, Muller and Emerson. Never heard of them, but I decided to call them up. As soon as it was when they opened at 9:00. So I called up, expecting to talk to the secretary and maybe book an appointment with their oil and gas specialist sometime in the future. So I told her what I was doing, drilling wells in Ohio, and she says, "This is your lucky day. The chairman of the board is here right now with the board, and they're looking for a driller. They're looking for a company that can drill wells in Ohio. Would you like to speak them right now on speakerphone?" I said, "You betcha." So she put me through to the meeting in progress, and then the chairman of the board, I explained to him, he said, how soon can you get here? I said, "I'll be there tomorrow." And they were my first clients.
Wow.
My first clients. Yeah. And I had multiple experiences like that where this inner voice would guide me. So I relied less on Rajasic energy, thinking to find a solution, where I would just pose my intention or pose my question, go into the silence and wait for the answer. And I was able to, in a 2-year period, to be successful enough raising money as a young man to earn enough money to pay the taxes to live the rest of my life without having to work again. So.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So you are suggesting that, when the mind is calm, the sattvic energy pulls up and there is sharper focus and clear decision making that an individual can experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And in addition to that, there's divine inspiration that can flow into a quiet mind that can't flow into a mind that's too busy. If it's full, there's no room for the inspiration to come.
Absolutely. So, boom, the download from the divine can happen when you have a calm mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How perfect. Okay. So, since we are talking about the power of human mind, you have operated at 2 extraordinary demanding disciplines. One is financial markets, trading on the streets, on the Wall Street, and another one is spirituality. So, what did these 2 disciplines teach you about the human mind's capabilities and its limitations?
So in terms of capacity, bringing the mind to one-pointedness is meditation. We did a program once in Carnegie Hall with my Baba. He was giving a presentation and I was the MC for the program. So I was able to bring my parents back after the program. And so I introduced Baba to my father. My father looked at him, Baba looked at my father and said, "Your father's a great yogi." And I was like shocked. because I'm the yogi, right? I was a little bit jealous. I said, what do you mean, Baba? What do you mean? And he said, your father is a master of yoga. His yoga is business, and he's a master at it. And I looked back and I saw that he had this tremendous ability to focus his mind on one particular thing. And he also had this tremendous ability to clear the mind. As I mentioned, there were 13 kids in the family growing up. So he would come back after work, exhausted, and busy. But he had this capacity to just stop, rest. We used to think he was sleeping, but he was in a form of meditation where he would clear his mind completely so he could leave the work behind him and be fully present with the family. So yoga can be practiced in business. Business can become a complete path, a complete yoga in and of itself.
How wonderful. Okay.
So limitations, the biggest limitation with the mind is that we tend to identify ourselves as the mind. It's a wonderful servant, but not a great master. So when we identify with our thoughts, with our ideas, become attached to them, it causes suffering. We realize that the mind is just the vehicle, and we can use the mind. We're not trying to kill the mind, or even try to kill the ego. And that's one of the things I love about Shaivism, is that it doesn't mean that you put an end to the ego. You just recognize its place. It has a function. Its function is to keep us alive, to protect us from snakes and diseases and those sorts of things. But when it tries to take over and become the boss, that's when it's a problem.
Yeah. Okay. So on the same lines, neuroscience is now confirming what the contemplative traditions have known for centuries, which is that meditation can reshape the brain. So for a corporate professional who has never ever meditated, so what is it that is costing them their performance just because they are not meditating?
Yeah, stress is the first thing that comes to my mind. Is that when I was working on Wall Street, I saw so many people around me just living in stress, and the way a lot of them handled it was through drugs and alcohol. And that's really a downward spiral.
Yeah.
Whereas meditation can put an end to stress, give you mental clarity. And I find it's the most productive tool that executives can have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Swamiji. So, do you believe that meditation has power to reshape the brain?
Absolutely. This is really, truly one of the great benefits of meditation, that the way we think are based on our old samskaras, our old thinking patterns, and much of our coping mechanisms as human beings were developed when we were infants, when we were children. So we didn't have the best way of coping with troubling times. And over time, those individual samskaras became patterns, became vasanas. And so the great gift really of meditation is that we can go back as adults and repurpose, create new neural pathways, create new ways of coping with difficult challenges. So absolutely, meditation is one of the best ways of reprogramming the way the brain functions.
And does meditation produce certain frequencies in the mind?
Yes, and these also can be controlled and developed. That as we meditate, we go into deeper, more powerful states of being. And, there's even technology now for people who are not used to meditating. One of my guru brothers, Brother Charles Swami Vivekananda, developed a sort of a scientific way of meditation using binaural beats. And what he did is he created competing sound waves of different frequencies that created a particular pattern in the brain and was able to replicate deep states of meditation. I've only done it a few times. I had powerful experiences with it, but I did have a student once who'd been meditating with me for almost 20 years, was a deep meditator, and she had an auto accident and had suffered some brain damage. And she came to me after a couple of years after that and said, I'm having difficulty meditating the way I used to, using mantras and things like that. And I gave her some of these sound tapes, and they were able to put her into meditation. She was able to recapture the natural state of meditation using these. The institute is called the Synchronicity Institute. It's in Faber, Virginia, and I highly recommend it if people are having trouble meditating. There's technology now that can help facilitate and make it easier for you.
Wow, how wonderful. Synchronicity.
Synchronicity, yes.
Okay, how perfect. Okay. So, in the Indian spiritual landscape, people who practice meditation talk a lot about chakras. Do you believe chakras exist in human body?
Well, I do believe that chakras exist. The way we language it in the yogic tradition is we talk about there's a physical body, but enfolded within that is an energetic mechanism called the subtle body. And this is where it's thought that the chakras are located. So if you dissect the physical body, you're not going to find chakras. But if you really look experientially at it, you'll notice that there are different centers that have different powers. These chakras roughly correspond to the plexuses, the plexi in the physical body. So where the plexus intersect in the physical body, the capillaries and things like that in the nervous system, it produces capacities, creative potential. And there, in the yoga tradition, it said that there are 7 chakras, beginning at the base of the spine, the Muladhara chakra, the root chakra. This is the seat of life. Yogis say this is where the breath of life emanates. The second chakra, the Swadhisthana chakra, which is the seat of our sexuality and of our procreation. And there's an intimate relationship between those two. The third chakra is called the Manipura chakra, the seat of the willpower, the individual willpower, but also the divine willpower, the Icha Shakti. The Anahata chakra, the seat of love and all the colors and the spectrum of love, kindness, generosity, compassion, those sorts of things. So the 5th center is the Vishuddha chakra. Vishuddha means purity, integrity. So this is talking about the power of communication, the power of speech, with the idea being that our thoughts and our words should match each other. And this is the power of speech and communication. The Ajna chakra in the space between the eyebrow, extending all the way back to the pineal gland, often referred to as the third eye. Also is thought to be the seat of the inner guru, the grace-bestowing power of God within us. And it's this inner guru that commands the movement of consciousness to the Sahasrara, which is the 1,000-petaled lotus. This is where the mystical marriage takes place between Shiva and Shakti. And 1,000 in Sanskrit is a symbol for infinity. And so it's here that the infinite Shaktis, the infinite powers, reside and can be opened and expanded.
Okay. And how can one practice chakra meditation?
Well, we do in our Shaktipat intensives, we do a specific meditation on it, and there are a variety of ways to do it that can be done. I like to use the bija mantras, the idea of chanting mantras, combining breath and mantras. So we focus on a particular chakra and repeat the seed mantra for that. So the heart, for example, would be Yam, Hum, Om, Ram, Bum, Lum. So you can repeat mantras, bringing your full awareness there. You can meditate using the breath. And the purpose of meditating on the chakras is to remove whatever blocks there might be. There might be some scars, old patterns where energy gets stuck and gets blocked. So if we're stuck in the second chakra, it can block our creativity, our sexual expression. There's a lot of sexual wounding in that area that can be healed through breath work, through mantra repetition. So I strongly encourage people to work on opening their chakras, to really avoid any sort of spiritual bypass. So if we have certain blocks or certain patterns within us, we need to look at those and be willing to transcend them.
Okay. So, which chakra represents creative energy?
Creative energy is represented by the second chakra.
Okay. And is it the same of the sexual energy as well?
It's the same energy, it's the same chakra. And so many creative artists, not all, but many creative artists, are very careful to conserve their sexual energy. Many people practice celibacy because that same energy, Shakti, can be expressed in a variety of ways. So it can be expressed as sexuality, it can be expressed as creating music or art. So the yogis conserve this spiritual power. And the idea of becoming an Urdhvareta means that the Kundalini energy uses the fuel of sexual energy, uses the full of the second chakra to continue its journey upward. So in the tantric tradition, it's thought that the energy, if it flows out, you deplete the energy. If you can conserve it and move it upward, it can be used creatively and ultimately lead to full self-realization.
Okay. And do you believe that people are really wasting their creative energy with meaningless sex?
I do, and I think if people really honestly look at their experience, I mean, just as an example, many men, when after they experience an orgasm, what do they want to do? Sleep. They go unconscious, right? So the yogis are very careful to preserve the sexual fluid, to honor it, and to use it for spiritual purposes rather than sexual enjoyment. There's nothing wrong with sexual enjoyment.
When should sex happen? Only out of love, or what do you recommend from your side?
Well,
Should we all turn towards celibacy? Stop having sex?
uh-huh.
What should we do?
I think that's really honestly a personal decision.
Okay.
Some people want to express only love through their sexuality. You know, many in the tantric community now are exploring, and I encourage exploration, you know, for self-discovery. You know, we want to go beyond all our limiting beliefs around it. There's a lot of superstition, a lot of religious dogma about it. I'm not big in all of that. But from my own experience, conserving the spiritual power and using it for the highest possible purposes is right for me. I'm not going to prescribe for anyone else, but
Okay. So it's really an individual's belief and what suits them. So you're saying that lust is not bad, but preservation of creative energy, because the source is same, is what you recommend.
yes, I do. So I'm a tantric, so I don't judge anything as bad. I include everything. You know, we avoid that label of good, bad. It's just that people at different stages of development have different values, different wants, different needs, and it's a movement upward. So I would consider lust on the lower end of the spectrum, but that energy can be transmuted. There's a wonderful book in the Western tradition called Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill wrote that. And it's largely about making money, but he recognizes the value of the sexual energy and says that this is the fuel that can bring anything into manifestation. So if you want to manifest sexual pleasure, sex is fine. If you want to manifest wealth or create a business or something like that, you can use that same energy, repurpose it for the highest possible
Yeah.
purpose.
So
And that's really
transformation of the sexual energy into creative energy, if that suits an individual, is what you're recommending, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Perfect. Okay. So, sir, in the Indian spiritual landscape, a lot of people have heard the name Tantra. What is the meaning of Tantra?
Tantra for me means the harnessing of power, the harnessing of the Shakti for the purpose of self-realization. And this entire universe is composed of Shakti. She's the substance of the universe. So any experience in life can be used for the purpose of awakening. And for me, that's the true Tantra. I don't think it's necessarily about pleasure or, having great sex or anything like that, which is pretty common in the Neo Tantra community right now. For me, it's harnessing the energy of every experience in life for the purpose of knowing our own divinity. It can be positive experiences, seeing a beautiful sunset, listening to beautiful music, eating good food. Any of those things are very natural because you feel the bliss arising from your own being. And that's the key, is to recognize that the enjoyment and the satisfaction we get isn't out there. Seeing a beautiful sunset, you might close your eyes and feel the awe and the joy arising within, the bliss that comes from within. Listening to beautiful music, it's not the music, it somehow touches something inside of you. So Tantra is using the external stimulation to go within and to experience the joy, which is our natural state. And that includes, by the way, even what we call painful experiences. So one of the Dharanas in a great scripture called the Vidyan Bhairava Tantra describes 112 practices, 112 different ways of accessing the self. It says, take a pin and prick your finger. And in the moment of the pain, observe where the experience of pain is coming from and utilize that energy to go back to the source of all experience. Another sutra says, in a moment of absolute terror, you're running through the jungle and the tiger is about to eat you, right? Where's that fear coming from? But it's energy, it's pure Shakti taking the form of fear. And that Shakti can take the form of love, fear, lust, greed, can take many, many different forms. If you recognize that everything is a play of Shakti, then every experience of life becomes an opportunity. We don't repress our feelings. We don't suppress any experiences in life. We embrace it all and go to the source of the experience itself. And that's divine.
That's divine.
And for me, that's Tantra.
For you, that's Tantra. Okay. So what we've heard across in terms of Tantra is that there are two types of Tantra these days. One is classic, another one is Neo. What exactly is the difference between classic Tantra and Neo Tantra?
So classic Tantra has been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's tried and true. It brings the results. You can realize the self through tantric practices, right? Vidyan Bhairava explains all 112 of those, and there are many, many different forms. Neo means new. And it's largely a 20th century creation, with, I think, a little bit of an overemphasis on the sexual aspect of it. So I don't know that the Neo Tantra has been proven yet, tried and true. I haven't yet met a fully realized being whose primary practice was Tantra. I think it can be a gateway, an opening for many to go into the deeper, truer Tantra. I'm often a guest at Tantra festivals where I teach classic Tantra, which includes things like mantra, Shaktipat, the teachings on Kundalini and chakra. All of these things are tantric practices, and all the practices that are in the Vidyan Bhairava Tantra.
Vigyan Bhairav Tantra.
Vidyan Bhairava Tantra, yes.
112 meditation practices.
Yes.
To achieve divinity. Okay. So is there a book that you would recommend to read Vigyan Bhairav Tantra?
Well, there are many, many different translations of it. The one I mostly use is by Jayadev Singh.
Jayadev Singh?
Jayadev Singh, who was a disciple of the great Kashmiri Shaivite teacher Lakshman Ju. He was also, Jayadev Singh was also a Sanskrit scholar, so I think it's maybe the most accurate. There are many, many different translations of it. At one point I was teaching Vidyan Bhairava, I had 40 different translations of it. And Jayadev Singh's not that easy to read because he uses, unfortunately, a lot of Sanskrit to define other Sanskrit, but it's the most accurate that I've seen so far.
Okay. And there's a book by Osho. It's called Book of Secrets. It also captures 112 ways of meditation. What do you want to say about that book?
Well, I've read it. It's a very interesting book. I wouldn't describe it as a good explanation of Vijnana Tantra. He doesn't. I don't believe he actually reads Sanskrit, so it's not an accurate description of or translation of what it actually is. And I think he took his inspiration from a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which was not a good translation. So, having read Osho's book, I didn't find it to be particularly accurate. That's not to say the practices aren't good. I think people practice Osho's teachings. I think he was using the Vijnana Tantra to explain his teachings rather than trying to elucidate the Vijnana Tantra.
All right. Thank you so much for the clarification.
So, one of the benefits of meditation is it helps us grow through various stages of development more quickly. There's a whole branch of psychology called developmental psychology, where they look at how we go from, a youngster to a teenager to an adult, and what they have found is that from youth to age 25, we go through lots of stages, maybe 5 or 6 stages of development. But from the age of 25 to 40, 45, most adults are only going to grow through one stage of development because they're so busy raising a family and earning money and having a career and all those sorts of things. But what they found is that people who meditate on a regular basis can go through a complete stage of development every 2 years. So if you can imagine, if you're meditating from the age of 25 to 40, you're going to be a completely different person at the end of that time. That's one of the reasons that yogis talk about you should do sadhana for at least 12 years or so you can go through these various stages. And each stage has a different perspective. We see the world through different eyes. It feels like an awakening, and many people feel, oh, I've reached this new stage. They feel like they're enlightened, but they realize that experience is only a stepping stone to the next stage of development, which goes on for most people for a lifetime. One of the best books I've ever seen is written by Sally Kempton. She's a Guru-bai. She was a student of Muktananda and a very talented writer. She wrote a book called The Heart of Meditation, where she gives quite a few meditation practices. She was a practitioner. She just recently passed away, but she was a practitioner for more than 50 years. And before that, she was a very talented writer. So it's a very well-written book. If people are interested in philosophy, the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism, a very wonderful book written by Swami Shankarananda, who's also a guru brother. It's called Kashmir Shaivism, Consciousness is Everything. And that gives a complete rundown of the whole philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism, and even includes some of the sutras like Shiva Sutras and Spandakarika, Vijnana Tantra.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So, if you want to share one piece of advice to the Indian working professionals, what would that be?
Clearly, it's meditate on a regular basis, that in order to really get the full benefit and to develop to your full capacity, develop a meditation practice. Go to someone who can teach you how to meditate and make a commitment to do it every day without fail.
And how long should they meditate?
I would say for a beginner, a minimum of 20 minutes a day. When I first started doing transcendental meditation some 50 years ago, I did it 20 minutes a day, twice a day. And then as your practice develops, you can move it up to 30, 40. What I like to do is a minimum of 1 hour
Every day.
Every day. And once I got Shaktipat, I was able to do that. Before I was doing 20 minutes twice a day. After I got Shaktipat, I could sit easily for 1 hour. In fact, I had to discipline myself not to meditate all day because it just felt so good. And I went almost 25 years before I missed a single day. And that's the key. Regular discipline practice. If you can start a practice and do it at the same time, the same place every day over a long period of time, that's how we develop the fruits of meditation, get all the benefits.
And what exactly is the fruit of meditation?
Joy. Joy, peace, happiness, fulfillment. Ultimately, it's complete and full knowledge of the self. And the benefits along the way are you get the fruits of connecting with the self.
So, some people claim that in the state of samadhi, they have seen Lord Shiva or Jesus in their shape and form. Is that true?
Yes, I think it is true that on the path, whatever deity, whatever our Ishta Devata is, will manifest in form. So for me, in the early stages of meditation, I'd been raised Catholic. My Ishta Devata was Jesus Christ, right? The Sacred Heart, in fact, of Jesus. And in the early stages of meditation, it was one of the first visions that I had was that as I was chanting the mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, suddenly I saw a beautiful light coming towards me. And as the light got closer, I could see that the light was coming out of the heart of Jesus. And I was able to zoom into the heart, and inside the heart I could see my Baba sitting there, and the light was coming out of his heart.
Yeah.
And in the meditation I continued deeper, and I looked inside of his heart, and seated in there was me.
Yeah.
And the light was coming from my own heart. And I heard a little chuckle. It was my Baba's voice that said, "Who did you think you'd find in here?" So to make a long story short, whatever our Ishta Devata is, whatever form of God that we worship, we will meet that form on the way to full self-realization.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So, starting from tomorrow, you would be on a world tour visiting 18 countries to give Shaktipat intensive to people. So, if anyone wants to connect with you, what is the medium to connect with you?
Right now, the primary medium is a WhatsApp group called Brahmananda Sangha. We are developing a website. I have done very little in social media, but the WhatsApp group is the best way to reach me, to keep in touch, ask questions, find out my schedule. I'll be traveling. I leave tomorrow for Lithuania, and I'll come back to India in about 8 months. On the way, 18 countries on 4 continents. So, Brahmananda Sangha.
So, what's your final message to the people of India?
So, in the words of my own beloved Guru, Swami Muktananda, he would say, as I say, meditate on yourself, honor your own being, meditate with the awareness that God dwells within you, as your own consciousness. Realize the self within, and then see that same God in everyone, in everything, without exception. See God in others.
How wonderful. I'm already there. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing all the insights with us. It was a lovely conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really grateful for the invitation. You did a wonderful job interviewing me, and I thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
God bless.